All right. These next set of videos are going to look at uh, when we have a lot more data points and still using this idea of relationships between two quantities, and how we can sort of use our knowledge of linear functions to make predictions about what this data might be doing. The difference between these and the earlier problems is these data have a lot more data points. So on this first problem, we are looking at a graph that shows the relationship between mercury level and pH levels in lakes within Florida. To be honest, I know very little. I have just the information provided to me on this graph, and that's basically the total understanding I have on this topic. Now, generally looking at these points, I sort of notice that as the pH level seems to be increasing, my average mercury level does seem to be decreasing. There seems to be a general negative trend in the data, and I could sketch in a line here. I'm not sure that's what the best fit would look like, but it would be a generally sort of that path. Now here, notice it says as the pH level of Florida lakes decrease, so the pH level decreasing would be heading this way. So sort of working backwards. What is the average mercury level doing? Well, if we're working backwards, the average mercury level would actually be increasing. If we read the graph backwards, just a sort of interesting thing. All right, the correlation coefficient here is actually negative 0.575. So that's sort of in the middle of our, intervals of correlation. If we go back and look at our little table, that's, between 0.5 and 0.7, which we say is moderate. And it is negative, so we would say that there is a moderate negative, because it's decreasing, correlation between, pH levels and average mercury levels in Florida. Actually, Florida is FL. I don't know why I abbreviated it FA. Lakes. Now, something to keep in mind here, what that's sort of telling me is, yes, I can use this to make a prediction, but, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be great. It's going to give me a rough estimate. And, since this was, put into a computer, it does pop out what they deem the line of best fit. So the line of best fit is just going to provide us with a prediction. It's not necessarily going to be the exact value that you would get, but, that's what models give us estimates. And so this model, sort of, it's telling us, okay, given, a mercury level equals this sort of negative slope or rate of change times our pH level, and then we add this initial value. So we're told if there is a mercury level of 1, what do we estimate the pH level would be? And I could even look on, the graph here. Here is where the mercury level is 1, sort of where I've drawn it in. So I would guess something, somewhere in this range right here. You can't really see where I'm circling on the graph. Not at 10, not at 1, somewhere in between. And we'll see where our prediction files and how accurate we feel this line is. So we have 1 equals negative 0.152 p plus 1.531. And I'm basically now just going to solve my equation I've set up. A little bit of math work here. I know some of you might have missed, just some basic algebra. Some of you might have been like, no, it's good. We could have just, not done that for the rest of the semester, but it's here. Helps if I put in the right numbers. Watch your negatives. Negative to a negative ends up being a positive, which it should be. And when I throw this all in the calculator, I end up with a pH level of 3.493. Oh, that's a lot lower than it's. So I'm going to go over here. That would be like 3 point, somewhere. So my line's probably not very accurate. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's in that range I sort of predicted just by looking at the graph. So, maybe this model's not awful, but keep in mind, we only said there was this moderate relationship. So we can't be, like, oh yeah, it's definitely going to be close to that. It's not the strongest relationship between the two. Okay, the next one. We are shown the relationship between movies, opening weekends profit, and then their total world gross profit, or not profits, but like box office. And you can generally see the trend, as the opening weekend is larger, so is that overall um, world gross box office. So given the correlation coefficient, and check out that correlation coefficient, it is a 9, a 0.9. So that is very high. So there is a very high positive correlation between the opening weekend box office and the world gross box office. And that makes sense. Like, you're sort of like, okay, then you make more in opening weekend, you're going to make more overall. I'm totally okay with that. Seems very logical to me. All right, so Kung Fu Panda 4 just opened up, and it had a box office around 58 million on its opening weekend. And so if I'm using this model to help make my predictions, could I predict where it's going to sort of make overall? I'm going to sort of map out where I think it will end up at. And so to do this, I'm going to be using sort of my parameters down here, because notice it does give me this right here. This is my rate. This is how much, per each, additional million it made opening weekend, how much more I could expect on that world gross profit. And I personally am going to set up a linear function for this one. So we have that rate, the 7.5, and I'm just going to round that. And then sort of our opening weekend. And then add to it saying, even if it didn't have a good opening weekend, you're still probably going to pull in around 15.4 million. And so putting those two together, what could we expect our prediction to be? And we could expect that Kung Fu Panda might be pulling in around 450.4 million. And depending on how you rounded those values, your value might be slightly off. Different from mine, but in that same ballpark. But that's sort of a way that we can use that knowledge of linear functions to make sort of guesses, predictions. Where do we think this data is heading? And it's a helpful thing when I'm trying to look at two quantities that are changing together, and how can I use one data point to predict another sort of data value. Hopefully, a sort of better again, this is like a surface level understanding of this material. We're not taking a deep dive into this. That would take months and months, but hopefully we're feeling a little more confident